I don't know about you, but I'm feeling 2022. A full year after Formula One's reimagining of ground effects was supposed to underpin an all-new aerodynamics package, the long-awaited technical overhaul finally enters from stage right. But the changes have a lot to live up to. 2021 proved to be one of the best F1 seasons in years, providing one of the all-time greatest championship battles to claim the globe's attention. And it did that with the old cards. 2022's renewed aero package has promised to add closer racing and thus afford a greater chance for drivers to make decisive overtakes on track. Let's hope F1 can cope with the hype. Although originally planned for 2021, the COVID-enforced postponement of the rules has the side effect of placing the bulk of design and development for 2022 under the remit of a cost cap, which wouldn't have been possible with a 2021 start date. So the overhaul in technical regulations acts as something of a soft reset, and it'll be impossible to predict the pecking order until the season kicks off properly in Bahrain. Not that this is ever going to stop us trying, of course. What we can do is explore what the 2022 regulations are and what they mean for the team's design departments across the grid, as they sink their teeth into a brave new world for F1. So let's start off with F1's best intentions. What were the aims for 2022? When outlining the new concept of car, F1 and the FIA sought to resolve a problem that had irked the championship for decades, a lack of close racing and overtakes resulting in a series of bland races. F1 has struggled to host consistently exciting races throughout its history. It's not just a modern day problem. The definition of the new regulations has hence been carried out in a manner unlike previous amendments to the rules, using numerous simulations and models to lessen the impact of the dirty air that pervades every attempted overtake and washes the chasing car away. The danger here is that F1 has attempted to control the inputs with tightly regulated bounding boxes and standardised parts to get the effect that it wants. People want designers to have more creativity, but at what cost? And can you argue with apparent figures that F1 has presented? According to the CFD simulations conducted comparing 2019's cars to a 2022 concept, F1's 2022 model retained 86% of its downforce when following one car length behind another, compared to the 55% retained downforce experienced with the same scenario for the 2019 car. Even as far as 7 car lengths behind, the 2019 car only produces 79% of its total downforce, while the 2022 car reads at 98%. It is difficult to know what scenarios these figures extend to, but if they're applicable to all sorts of corners, then the figures paint the picture that the cars will be able to race at much closer quarters than we used to. But it's not as simple as that amid a new technical battleground. To try and keep those figures relatively untouched, F1 has mandated new bits of kit for the 2022 cars. The biggest ticket item is the reintroduction of a ground effect style formula for the first time in about 40 years, albeit with the greater sophistication expected with years of progress. The flat underside of the floor and conventional diffuser are now done away with, and replaced by Venturi Tunnels, which are designed to create greater airflow acceleration, producing the drop in pressure that one associates with the reduction of downforce. By relying on the floor for more of that downforce, F1 has done a lot of trimming. The rear wing has shed its conventional wing planes and end plates to become a one-piece design that curls around the horizontal components to the vertical parts with no exposed edges, limiting the amount of turbulence shed from it. The desire to limit the exposed edges extends to the front wing too, where the end plates bend upwards akin to something you'd be more accustomed to seeing on a jetliner. That front wing is simplified too, with elements that clip directly onto the nose cone instead of the raised design we're accustomed to seeing, and the number of elements reduced to a maximum of 4. Moving more central, the increasingly complex bargeboards are gone too, having become ridiculously detailed following their full-size reintroduction in 2017. We can't say that our 3D guy will miss modelling those. Moving on, Pirelli, continuing as F1's tyre supplier, will introduce its 18-inch tyre as the centre point of a redefined wheel assembly. Along with those, wheel covers are making a return, while F1 has introduced a deflector above the front wheels to control the amount of turbulence produced as they rotate. Ditching the long-serving 13-inch tyre to the 18-inch construction will introduce a change in the overall handling characteristics, as the sidewalls will naturally prove to be stiffer owing to the larger wheel diameter, but the teams will undoubtedly try to compensate for the changes in their suspension setups. And in that, torsion bars will no longer be permitted for use as suspension springs. This mandates a return to coilover damper arrangements to simplify the geometry, while the third element inerters are removed entirely, limiting any trickery with hydraulic systems. To tighten things up further, the FIA has categorised every part on an F1 car into additional groups, expanding beyond the listed and non-listed designations implemented previously, to include increased standard supply components and open source parts, along with the prescribed parts mandated. So the question remains, will the new aero targets work? Lando Norris raised a very salient point about F1's aims to reduce the overall dirty air situation. The revised aero specifications will help the following car capture the corners, but at a cost. Everything that they're doing for next year is because they want to try and make the cars better to race and so on, Norris explained. But of course, if there's less dirty air when following, there's also less slipstream. It's like gaining in one area and then losing in another, because they're quite related to each other, so I hope it's better. To alleviate the reduced potency of the slipstream, DRS will remain for 2022 as F1 assesses the possibility of reducing its reliance on the system later down the line. It also depends on how much the teams are able to explore the bounds of the regulations. Creating cars that race competitively on track is not at the top of a team's list of concerns, making the fastest car possible is. But until we see the cars in action, realistically it's too early to say how things will play out at the moment. What about through the year? How will the new cars develop? One thing's for certain when you consider the cumulative effect of the new technical regulations and the cost caps. There won't be as much in-season development compared to previous years. There's also additional sporting regulations at play with regards to wind tunnel and simulation time, which we've done a video about previously. Keeping the bean counters happy will be the primary restriction on development, as the cost cap drops from $140 million to $135 million for the 2023 season. This could have a knock-on effect on any teams who struggle to pen a functional car from the get-go. But there's still some leeway to develop. Ferrari sporting director Laurent Mekies says teams won't be left screwed by a difficult start. And like any other season, any difficulties in testing will provide a focal point to develop towards. And on a slightly different note, in 2021, FlexiWing cycled back into F1 parlance to add another hot coal into the incandescent Mercedes and Red Bull battle. It should be less of a concern in 2022 given the increasing stringency of the load tests, but there might be new areas of trickery to explore. And finally, it's also expected that the 2022 formula will rapidly approach convergence in design concepts. If you're a fan of closely contested seasons, that can only be a good thing. There's also a chance you'll have to wait for that. 2022 will be won by the team that understands the new rules the quickest, but as convergence begins to take effect and returns diminish, 2023 and 2024 could theoretically herald the tightest margins ever seen in F1. But in the meantime, we've got 2022 to focus on. Let's hope it's a good one.